Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
This is episode 9 of the first season of the Creative Influencer podcast. Today we interview Brian Dunbar. Brian has worked on 10 different Super Bowl commercials, and we're going to take a deep dive into his last 3 involving Pierce Brosnan, Christopher Walken, and Melissa McCarthy. Brian also talked about the value of sponsorships and celebrity endorsements, and we conclude with a discussion about the transition from traditional advertising to digital media. This was a fun interview. I am joined today by Brian Dunbar. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
You are what they refer to as an ad man. Now, the question is, does anybody in advertising ever call themselves an ad man?
I don't know if people really call themselves an ad man or an ad woman. I do like occasionally now to refer to myself as a madman.
Because of Mad Men, the TV show.
The TV show, absolutely.
What has that done for the advertising agencies?
I think it's added a bit of sort of glamour to the advertising business again. It's given people a look at what some people call kind of one of the golden eras of advertising, sort of in its early stages of how modern advertising is made. And
Did
people
Mad Men ever exist?
Oh, absolutely. A friend of mine's father was president of an ad agency when I was getting out of college, and I was talking to him about going into advertising. And he was like, Brian, I don't know why the hell you would want to be in advertising now. It's all about quarterly profits and squeezed margins, and it's just no fun anymore. And, I went ahead and got in advertising anyway and found it to be a lot more fun than my friends that were working at law firms or at IBM or other company, more straight-laced kind of jobs. So I didn't know what he was talking about. Then Mad Men came out, and that's when he would have been sort of like Don Draper, right? Don Draper, and now I knew what he was talking about. And he kind of reminded me of Don Draper. His name was actually Don Carlos, and he was about 6'2" and had sandy blonde hair and always tan and a Scotch and whiskey kind of voice, and always had a great story and a smile. And
so he was
kind of Don Draper, and now I know what he was talking about. It certainly looked pretty darn fun back then.
How has it changed from when you started till now for you?
Probably all of those things that Don Carlos was talking about. It's become more corporate. Most of the ad agencies are owned by big publicly held companies and called holding companies. And from that standpoint, I think it's changed. What hasn't changed, it's still a business about creativity and finding interesting ways to promote products and brands. I only know of what it was like in the 60s and the 70s from watching Mad Men or Bewitched. I don't know if you ever watched that.
Yes, I did.
Darren Stevens.
I want to get into your background a little bit and then talk about advertising. You graduated from college where?
University of Nebraska.
And what was your degree?
In business.
And then you got a master's.
Well, I studied. I took a theater class when I was a freshman and sort of fell in love with it and acting. And pretty soon I was taking all my elective classes in acting. And by the time I was a senior, I had, was pretty decent at it and ended up auditioning for some fairly well-known graduate theater programs and got a graduate fellowship to the University of Michigan. But after doing it for a year and my analytical side kind of kicking in and looking at the statistics about how many actors actually make a living being an actor, I decided maybe should think about doing something else. And some friends of mine and my parents actually suggested, business and theater, have you ever thought of advertising? And I ended up taking a leave of absence from graduate school and got a job in an ad agency and have been doing that ever since.
And has your acting background helped?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, it's funny. I think of advertising as being sort of the theater of business. It is almost like putting on a presentation or a show or engaging people about a brand or a product. And it's very theatrical in nature. I mean, look at commercials, and advertising it by its very nature is theatrical.
I'm going to shift gears.
Okay.
Okay. You have been involved in how many Super Bowl commercials?
10.
And I looked it up, and the last Super Bowl had over 110 million viewers.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the most watched television show.
Right.
What kind of pressure does that put you under when you're producing a commercial?
A lot. First of all, because your clients are investing a huge amount of money. A 30-second Super Bowl ad costs about $5 million.
Now, that's just the airtime.
That's just the airtime. And the clients, that I've worked on for the past couple of years have been doing 60s. So that's $10 million for just the airtime. And then you have...
And that's for one commercial?
One commercial.
For 60 seconds?
60 seconds.
Okay, so a 60-second commercial, $10 million
Right.
to air it.
To air it.
About how much does it cost to develop and shoot it?
Well, let's just talk first about the production cost. And, depending on, a lot of Super Bowl commercials feature celebrities or big special effects, millions of dollars to produce a Super Bowl commercial. Depending on the celebrity, it could be many millions of dollars. And then you have, of course, the ad agency's fees to help develop the commercial. And I would say all in, that's cost several million dollars too. So it's an expensive proposition to be in the Super Bowl.
And we'll come back to the benefits of this.
Okay.
But I want to talk to you about the last 3 Super Bowl commercials you worked on.
Okay.
It was 2015 with Pierce Brosnan, 2016 with Christopher Walken, and 2017 with Melissa McCarthy.
Right.
So, because I'm a lawyer and we're going to go in chronological order, let's start with the 2015 with Pierce Brosnan.
Sure.
What was the concept for that commercial?
Well, the last 3 commercials I worked on in the Super Bowl were all for Kia Motors, and Pierce Brosnan was selected to be in a commercial for the redesigned Sorento, which is their mid-sized SUV. And the new design was very sophisticated, but also quite capable as well. So the analogy was, it's kind of like a fit for an action adventure hero. And so we looked at different ones, and if you're trying to have that blend of sort of suave sophistication as well as capable as sort of a action adventure, Pierce Brosnan really fits the bill.
Kind of James Bond, art thief.
Yep, art thief, Remington Steele. He's got good comic sense as well. So anyway, the premise of the commercial was that his agent calls him in for a meeting. He's got a project to talk to him about. And of course, Pierce Brosnan thinks it's an action-adventure movie. And the agent is gently trying to explain it's a commercial for Kia, but every time he starts to describe it, Pierce Brosnan puts it in the context of an action-adventure movie. Things blowing up, snipers, going 200 miles an hour in a car.
Launchers.
Missile launchers. Yeah.
At the very end of the commercial, it's my favorite line. He's being pitched by his agent, and he says, "Can I keep the car?" Did he get to keep the car?
He did get to keep the car. He did. He had a Kia Sorento as it was part of the deal. And I think that's cool that it's authentic in the sense that he wanted the car as well, and hopefully has driving it around Malibu and once in a while.
From concept to the end, how long did this commercial take to develop?
Probably around 6 months. 6 months, give or take.
And how long is the brainstorming session where you finally get the concept down?
That usually from the agreeing on what product is going to be featured, on what we want to focus on in terms of the product, the strategy behind the ad, and then concepting different ideas, running those through the client, and eventually agreeing on one. For Super Bowl, at least 3 months of that process, about half the time. Yeah, I mean, some of these go into maybe 7 or 8 months from kickoff to actual airing of the Super Bowl ad.
And then the second one they wanted to talk to you about was Christopher Walken, which of the 3 is my favorite. It involves socks. What was the concept for this commercial?
Well, they were coming out with a new redesigned Optima, which was for a mid-sized sedan, right? Which is sort of the mass market car, and it's can can be a bit plain. Some of them are a bit plain, and this one was super stylish. And so it was talking about how a person who would drive a mid-size sedan could up their game, could look a little bit more stylish and sophisticated if they were driving an Optima. So the concept was that a guy is looking for his beige socks. What could be more boring than beige socks? And his wife says, "Have you checked the walk-in closet?" So it's a play on words, and he goes in his walk-in closet, and there's Christopher Walken
and everything's
sitting there in his
beige in the
closet.
closet.
Everything's beige, except Christopher Walken's got a pair of beige socks balled up, and he's wearing this cool, colorful sock on his other hand, making a sock puppet, and he talks about whether he wants to go through life, being a boring beige person who eventually is going to get devoured by the more interesting, sock that he's got on his hand. He asks Richard, "Is that what you want, Richard?" And he says no. And then the back of the closet opens up, and lo and behold, there's a Kia Optima, which he proceeds to give him a tour of.
Great line there, too. A Kia Optima is like the world's most exciting pair of socks.
Right.
How long did you have to spitball that one? Because that's a great line.
Well, a lot of the copy for this commercial was really custom tailored for Christopher Walken. And by the way, this was a, all-in kind of idea. There wasn't, the Pierce Brosnan there, he was our first choice, but there were other action-adventure heroes that could have done that commercial and made it work. And nobody else could have made, the walk-in closet concept work. And it was written around his personality. So the copy was fine-tuned, and we worked with him, actually.
What was your level of confidence when you first pitched the idea to his agent that you could get him?
Well, I actually had the initial contact with his agent, and we knew he doesn't do a lot of commercials. In fact, we could only find one, and it was for a Swedish clothing brand, and he actually didn't speak in it either. So, yeah, it was a bit of a long shot, and his agent told me, she said, "Brian, I like this concept. I think it's really interesting, and I think it would be interesting for Christopher to do a Super Bowl commercial. I'll run it by him." But we get dozens and dozens of commercial offers for him every single year. And he's only said yes one other time for this other kind
Swedish,
of online. I mean, it's very below the radar, but it's a very cool commercial. And I said, okay, and I relayed that back to everybody. We had a backup concept, but everybody was super excited about this. And then she gets back to me and says, well, he's looking at it. That's a good sign. Usually I tell him what it's about. He doesn't even look at the script. He's looking at it. It's great, and this is on a Thursday. And then Friday she calls him back, and she said, well, he thinks it's pretty interesting. He'd like to think about it over the weekend. She goes, I got to tell you, that's a really good sign. And so on Monday, she tells me, we're on pins and needles waiting to find this out. And she says, I think he wants to do it. And then Tuesday was he wants to do it. And then, of course, we have to make a deal, which, actually they made fairly quickly and fairly painless. It was a very, good deal for all sides. And so we were off to the races. And then we wanted to work with him about how he would look, and he was involved in casting the other actor that played Richard, in his lines, in his wardrobe. He was very hands-on, very involved in making sure it would live up to his expectations.
Now, he didn't drive in the commercial. Is there a story behind that?
He doesn't drive. So he didn't, if you're going to ask me, did he get a car too?
Right.
We, of course, offered that, but he doesn't drive, so it really wasn't necessary. He's a very interesting man.
You did break the mold with him because the next year he did a Super Bowl commercial with Justin Timberlake.
That's right. So I think he got warmed up. Hopefully we warmed him up to the idea of how fun that could be.
The sock was a Stance sock,
right.
The name of the company.
Right.
What kind of deal, what was the negotiation with the sock company?
Right. So in the concept of the commercial, of course, he's got to be wearing a sock that's super cool and super interesting and colorful. And at the time we were doing that commercial, Stance socks were really popular. A lot of celebrities were wearing them and posting them on Instagram. And so we actually reached out to them to see if they would be interested in having us feature their sock. In the Super Bowl commercial. We were not asking for a paid endorsement on their part. Some people have asked me, did they pay to be in that? No, we thought it was a good deal for both of us. They were super excited
I can imagine.
to have their sock featured in a Super Bowl commercial. And part of the deal was that they had to promote it through their fairly formidable social media channels.
Well, I checked last night, and they have 1.1 million followers on Instagram. And this is a sock company.
Right. And a lot of that had to do with they have some celebrities that wear their socks. So that's part of what we're tapping into, and that's a big part of doing a Super Bowl campaign. We would never approach these as being just a Super Bowl ad. It's a whole Super Bowl campaign, and increasingly social media is becoming a huge part.
Well, let's actually touch on that, and then we'll go to the third one that you
Okay.
did. So when you first started doing Super Bowl commercials,
Right.
how much was social media a part of that mix?
Very little.
What is
Very
it
little.
now?
A huge part of it. I mean,
And how so?
everybody. Well, you're making as we talked about, a massive investment in the Super Bowl commercial, and you are reaching 110 million people, which are, based on the latest research I've seen for the last couple of years, the people are actually more interested in watching the ads than they are in the football game. So you have 110 million people who are actually really interested in watching your commercial.
Yeah.
So you want to make the most of it, and you're paying a huge premium over, say, what it would cost to reach that audience if you aggregated them on different television shows. You're paying a very large premium to get them all at once, and for the sort of the cultural spectacle of it. So there's ways you can activate it. You can release the commercial early online to build up some interest and talk value about
And
it.
I've seen where a lot of companies do that now.
Right. It's almost the norm now.
How far in advance do you release it?
Usually a few days. In Kia's case, usually we would do it perhaps the Thursday before the Super Bowl. So you want enough that it's still, you want to create some buzz about it, but you don't want to completely let the, exactly. Some companies will release them as far as 2 weeks in advance. Now, in the case of actually all three of these commercials, another thing that we did to sort of create some buzz about the commercial that was coming in the Super Bowl, we recorded some, let's call them more traditional car commercials with mostly car footage in them with a voiceover of the celebrity. And we did no PR announcement about that. So when all of a sudden a Kia, what we call a running footage commercial, comes out with Pierce Brosnan as the voiceover, people start to talk, or Christopher Walken in particular, people really talked about that one.
And are those put on the different YouTube channels?
No, those are actually ran
TV?
on TV and as well as on YouTube channels, but yes.
Now we turn to the third one, which was with Melissa McCarthy.
Right.
Won an award.
Yeah, well,
Won several awards. Yeah.
Yes, it did.
I'm going to let you
Sure.
tell about that.
The one that's most, sort of gratifying as being in the industry is the USA Today Ad Meter poll. Pretty much the industry standard of which commercial wins the Super Bowl, which was the most popular in America.
What was a hit, what was not.
Exactly. And so they rank them from one until, God forbid you're the last. It's really hard to explain that to your client, that how you ended up in the last spot on the USA Today poll. Fortunately, have never ended up there.
Have they ever, just as an aside, have they ever done a study of the companies that do the last? Do they continue to keep that account, or is that a routinely?
I don't know if that is, certainly a lot of tap dancing has to be done to explain it. Also, I find the ones that tend to do it at the bottom are the ones that forget that the people are watching Super Bowl commercials to be entertained. And if you try to be highly informational or try to sell too hard in a Super Bowl commercial, it's going to fall pretty flat. And maybe companies are okay with that. They said, well, we got our message across to, it may not have been popular, but we got our message across to 110 million people.
Right.
And there's some value in that regardless of where you rank in the poll.
That's an advertising man's spin on that.
Exactly, right. I guess that's what I would say if I was in those shoes.
I don't know that
Fortunately,
I've
never had to be that. So
anyway.
it was the number one commercial, and you wait. I mean, I got up at 5:30 in the morning on Monday morning to see the results, and it's a pretty big deal when you find out, you wake up
how
and
you
find
ranked.
out. Yeah.
So tell me about the concept.
Sure. So Kia was introducing this new hybrid car called the Niro, and that was going to be the purpose of the commercial. But it was, now that we have all electric cars, a hybrid car isn't, completely eco-friendly, right? It isn't completely emission-free. It's very low emission, but it also doesn't have the advantage of a hybrid. It doesn't have the trade-offs in an electric car. It doesn't have the range issues that electric cars have. So the interesting thing we found out in our research about people who want to drive hybrids is oftentimes they're doing it for some altruistic reasons. They want to do their part to make the environment a little bit better, but to an extent, they don't want to have too many trade-offs. So
you want to get from here to there in
exactly, comfort. And in comfort and not with a lot of trade-offs or sacrifices, and still drive a nice-looking car. Some hybrids, depending on what kind, aren't always the most attractive cars either. So the Niro was a very good-looking car. So the idea we had was, here's a way for you to kind of do your part for the world without having to make too many trade-offs. And the way it translated was, you don't have to be an eco-warrior to drive like one. The Niro makes that really easy. So like all really good advertising, how are you going to take that idea and sort of exaggerate it or dramatize that idea? And we said, well, what if we have sort of an eco-warrior showing what an eco-warrior has to go through and risk their life, to be an eco-warrior versus how easy it is to drive the Niro. And so it became this comedic idea, and we thought we would have a comedic actor or actress. And we definitely thought of Melissa McCarthy from the get-go. There were probably other people that could have done the role, but nobody does physical comedy, beat you up physical comedy better than Melissa McCarthy. And she had this great quote that she did in a press release. She goes, this was the perfect project for me. I've been looking for something where I could get every bone in my body broken while still doing something good for the world. It was a great quote. And we approached her, and she was interested because she liked the concept and she liked the car as well. The car, she wanted to drive the car first and know about the car and feel like something she was comfortable with. She got two.
She got Christopher Walken's car.
Yeah, exactly. She got the one Christopher Walken didn't get.
So tell me about the commercial. There's whales, there's trees, there's an ice cap, there's rhinos.
Yeah. So the idea is Melissa McCarthy is out trying to be an eco-warrior, and things like in Melissa McCarthy movies or skits don't go very well, and things go wrong, and she gets thrown around, beat up, but of course always survives, and she's driving her Kia Niro, throughout the commercial. In between all of her little, her assistant is calling her saying the trees need saving, the ice caps need saving, and finally he's telling her that the rhinos need saving, and she's imagining how that's going to go in her mind based on how the rest of her escapades have gone, and she says, no thanks, and drives on in her Kia Niro.
The Super Bowl, this particular Super Bowl was on Sunday, February 5th. Melissa McCarthy made a surprise appearance the night before on
Saturday Night Live, unannounced, playing Sean Spicer, which I think has become one of the most iconic skits on Saturday Night Live.
I watched it last night. It was
in recent history, incredibly funny. But we didn't know this, and so I happened to be home with my wife watching Saturday Night Live on Saturday night, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Melissa McCarthy playing Sean Spicer." And we're current administration doesn't take well to being poked fun at. And I'm like, oh my God. I thought it was hilariously funny and a spot-on impression by Melissa McCarthy, but now I'm starting to think as an ad man.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like,
what's this going to do
to my commercial? And what's my client going to think? I didn't get any late night calls, but I did see a text from my client at 6 the next morning on Super Bowl Sunday, heard Sean Spicer was on doing an impression, heard Melissa McCarthy was doing an impression of Sean Spicer. And what do you think? And I said, well, let's talk. I think generally it's okay. And I said, let's see if there are any tweets come out of the White House. And, didn't see any tweets out of the White House, so that was sort of a relief. And then I thought, look, it was an incredibly, the reviews coming out of it were, gosh, it was funny, it was spot on, it was an amazing surprise appearance, seemed to be incredibly well received, and certainly she was the forefront of the American public consciousness, either from the PR they saw on Sunday online or on any news program they would watch. or if they had actually watched Saturday Night Live the night before. I'm sure people were pulling it up online to see the skit. So I think in the end, it actually really helped us.
So how much did you have to pay to get her on Saturday Night Live?
We didn't. We had nothing to do with it, and we had no advance notice either. So it was a bit of a surprise. In the end, a pleasant surprise.
Right. So now it won the award, the USA Today award.
Yeah, and that's more than an award. That's actually a rating. It's like people, rate the ads, and so it was the highest rated ad.
Why do you think it was so popular?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I've worked on now 10 Super Bowl commercials over a long period of time, and definitely there are certain kinds of humor tends to win. Not always. There have been serious commercials that have been number one in the USA Today poll, but humor generally wins. And when you're talking about a cross-section of the American public, it needs to be very accessible humor. Simple and physical humor in particular tends to work. More sophisticated humor appeals to some, but not as much to others. So it had all the right ingredients. It had a very simple message. You don't have to be an echo warrior to drive like one. We had probably the best physically comedic actress in the world, who now is at the forefront of everybody's imagination because of her Saturday Night Live appearance, who gave a fantastic performance. We had a great song that you remember, I Need a Hero, by Melissa Etheridge, and I think helped carry the spot as well. So it moved quickly, it had great humor, it had Melissa McCarthy, it had a song that people probably identified with and remembered fondly, and it had a simple message. So I think it had all the right ingredients to be the winning Super Bowl commercial. And I think we were hopeful going in, knowing it had all those ingredients.
I want to stay on Super Bowl commercials, but I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
So when a company comes to say to you, hey, we want to do a Super Bowl spot.
Right.
How many of them say that and then realize the process and then kind of rethink? Or are they sophisticated enough at that point that they know what they're getting in for?
So the ones that I have worked on were all companies that knew they wanted to do it and were doing it for the right reasons. And I also believe if you're going to be in the Super Bowl, you need to play to win. Yeah. I don't want to be number 65 I want to get all the free publicity. A huge part of Kia's strategy too, and they were very, very astute and good at it, was the amount of PR impressions we would generate. We would generate like 1 billion PR impressions from our Super Bowl campaign. That had nothing to do with the paid media part so that's part of maximizing the value as well. I've had a couple of people clients over the years, toy with the idea and want to explore the idea, and then I think when they understood all the costs associated with it, all the risks, and how you would actually measure success, they ultimately decided not to. I think you need to go into it fully understanding what the value of it is and how you're going to maximize the value. I think if you don't activate your Super Bowl campaign, you're not getting the maximum value.
Now, you were former president at David and Goliath.
Right.
And I saw an interview with David and Goliath representative where he said that the Super Bowl creative process is a marathon, not a sprint. Can you walk me through what is the process? So the company comes in and said, we do want to do a commercial this year. What's the next thing you guys do?
In the case of Kia, it was usually to promote a new model like the Niro, an all-new model, or the Optima and the Sorento were completely redesigned models. So they were doing it for the right reasons. They wanted to get mass awareness about this new product that they had in the market. And they were also astute enough to know that we're going to do creative that's going to generate PR, get talked about, generate millions of views online, hopefully billions of PR impressions. So they were very smart about approaching the Super Bowl. So that's the first, is deciding. You have to buy the ad. By the way, you have to buy the ad usually the upfront market is moving in May of the year prior to the Super Bowl, and that's when the commitment has to be made. And it's very complicated. Advertisers who have been in before have first right of refusal.
And then how do you decide your time spot?
That is decided based on how long you've had that time slot. Generally, the longer you've been buying the Super Bowl, the better slot you conceive, or you get to choose it.
And obviously, right after opening kickoff has to be a prime spot.
That's a
'cause
prime spot.
The game is still a game.
That's still considered the spots right after kickoff are considered
The best.
The most expensive, the hardest to come by. The advertisers that have, look at the advertisers who are in those slots. They are advertisers that probably do multiple Super Bowl commercials every single year.
And then what about the fourth quarter advertisement? I mean, in recent years, fourth quarter's been great.
Absolutely.
But there was a string for 10 years in a row where fourth quarter was just, let's go get another beverage.
So if you can get in the first quarter, I think obviously that would be the best place to be. But it's very difficult to, if you've not been advertising the Super Bowl for a long time, to get a slot in the first quarter. Second quarter, I think games are still usually
tight.
Anybody's game. In the second quarter, there's hope, even if they're way behind. The losing team always has hope.
Well, we saw the Falcons and the Patriots. There's hope.
Right.
There's hope.
Right. And then the third quarter, if it starts to run away, I think people lose interest. But there's an upside for advertisers. They may lose interest in the game, but they don't lose interest in the commercials. So, but I think in the best scenario is if you're in the fourth quarter, you're hoping it's a tight game, so people are still equally engaged in the game and the commercials.
So it's May. You bought your time slot.
Yep.
What's the next step?
So you figure out what product it's going to be. In the case of Kia, they knew what product was going to be. Then you have to figure out what's the communication strategy. What's the one thing that we're going to communicate to people?
And do you actually sit like in a conference room with a whiteboard and just kind of spitball ideas?
Yeah, there's some of that. We do some research. There's a big team of people that works on it, and you try to craft a strategy ultimately, and you craft it down into a one-page brief that said, here's what the product we're trying to promote, here's what we're trying to say, here's the people that it's most important that we communicate with, and here's what they should take away from that ad. And once that's approved, you start the concepting process, and we'll generally come in with, there'll be a first round, and you'll show a number of ideas, and there might be a second or a third. Some years, we got to the Melissa McCarthy idea quick. It was, everybody knew that was a winner from the get-go. Other years, it was a longer process to get there. And then once that idea is approved, which that may take a few months, then you work with a production company and a director to bring it to life, and then you're also working on all the activation elements, the social media, the online components, other content you're creating around the campaign.
How long does that part take? I mean, when do you start planning the social media, what you're going to do?
You generally have an outline. Yeah, you generally, when you're doing the concept, you have an outline of what the social media and online and other content strategy is going to be. You have a rough idea, and then once the Super Bowl idea is approved, then you refine and further flesh that out.
I'm going to go from Super Bowl to NFL because I now have somebody I can ask and get an answer to this stuff. Bud Light is the official beer of the NFL.
Right.
Pizza Hut's the official pizza of the NFL. There was a study done for Adweek, or a survey. And this is like, you need a survey for this? 37% of all Americans who watch football like beer and pizza. It's like, okay, I get that. I get it. But there is Castrol is the official motor oil of the NFL. Bridgestone, the official tire. Quaker Oats, the official hot cereal. What's the strategy behind those kind of sponsorships?
Sure. Well, they come along with buying, some Super Bowl ads as well. They get that recognition. They might get that recognition in stadium and other promotion of the Super Bowl event. They can use it. So all of a sudden, I can link my brand
to the NFL.
Yeah, you have to have permission to say I am the official sponsor. I have any connection to the NFL, and if the NFL fans are your target for your product, then it can make sense. And you get these little things called bumpers in the Super Bowl. We say brought to you by the official official cereal
Courtyard by Marriott.
Right, exactly, official hotel or hospitality partner of the NFL. And so the hope is some of the cachet and status of the NFL and the appeal to the NFL fan will go, oh, that's a brand that's associated with the NFL, supports the NFL, maybe it makes me more interested in that brand. And there can be other components to those sponsorships as well. Oftentimes there's hospitality rights, so companies that want to entertain their big clients or maybe even their employees.
So when you're at the Super Bowl and you see the different corporate tents, that's part of that?
Yes, exactly. They might have the corporate tents outside and they have boxes on the inside or blocks of seats. So there's many different sort of components to those.
Is there a way to track return on investment for these?
Is there a standardized way? No. But yes, I think most of the... I saw, interestingly, an article about that recently that said only about 2/3 of companies say they do a really good job of tracking the ROI of their investments and in sports sponsorships. And I thought that was interesting. And of those, not all of them thought they were doing a good job.
How would you track it? How would you even go about that?
Well, first of all, you can translate all the media components into, you can say, well, what would it cost if we bought that on television? There's a certain thing of media exposure and PR exposure that can be measured. So you have the media component. The hospitality component, the salespeople can say, I closed a deal. It's
Right.
we closed a big deal. So maybe there's a way to quantify that as well. Then there's other things about, is it helping me sell more product? And one way, a very simple kind of research that brands do to help figure that out is what's the purchase intent among people that are fans of, say, the NFL or the Super Bowl versus ones that aren't, or ones that watch the Super Bowl and ones that didn't. And you can do that research and find out. And if you get a large lift in purchase intent among people who are, the fans of whatever you're sponsoring, then that's a good way of measuring whether it was a good investment. So I think it's probably those components: the media, the hospitality, and then what's the sales lift among people who are fans of that particular sport you're sponsoring versus ones that are not fans.
Which kind of leads me into, again, because I have you here, celebrity endorsements.
Yeah.
Because of influencers and the social media, there's been some pushback on celebrity endorsements that more companies are putting money into the influencers. Why do companies hire a celebrity to be in an advertisement in the first place?
Well, I think there's a very obvious reason. When you see a celebrity in an advertisement, it catches your attention. And if you like that celebrity, and generally, the biggest celebrities are the ones that are used, it draws you in to the commercial. And there's a difference between a celebrity endorser and using an actor. So in the case of the commercials we did for Kia, right, we used Pierce Brosnan and Christopher Walken and Melissa McCarthy. Are they celebrity endorsers? No, they're actually playing roles. Pierce Brosnan was playing himself, being an action hero. Christopher Walken was playing
Christopher Walken,
right? Christopher Walken, the actor, in all the interesting roles and movies he's done. And Melissa McCarthy was playing a role like she was playing herself, but playing, a role that she, with her name on it. And
so it's more the attention.
Yeah. Now, then you see other things. You see infomercials and stuff, and where people are actually pitching a product, and they might have an interest in that company, a beauty product or something like that, or a product that they say they use themselves. That's what I consider an endorsement. I guess you just have to ask yourself how credible those are. I think those are trickier to pull off, and people today in particular are a little more skeptical. They think they might be just doing it for the money.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is foundational because I want to get into how advertising campaigns have changed over the years to include social as a component.
Right.
Where does advertising fit in marketing, just from a foundational perspective?
Well, it's the outward part of marketing. There's marketing that sort of comes from the in. Marketing is a big term, right? Any way that you're promoting your product. Advertising generally refers to paid media support of your product, and marketing can have all kinds of other dimensions.
So, back before the internet, and it hasn't been that long ago.
Right.
Before YouTube's only 11 years old.
Right.
It's hard to remember that. But,
Right.
Back before pre-YouTube, let's put it that way.
Okay.
There were one-way ads. That
Yes.
being television ads, there was very little feedback that you would get.
Right.
How long did it take companies to fully adopt the social media component where it was two-way? People could comment, people could like.
Well, I think they're still adopting. I don't think there's been, it's still evolving. People are trying to figure it out. When brands first started using social media, there was some backlash. When people say, you're just trying to sell me something. You're not being authentic. And today that's really important for brands to be authentic when that two-way communication is happening, that they're being true to who they are. They're not just trying to sell people something. when it truly does become a dialogue. And I think today that consumers have the ability to sort of co-create brands or co-develop brands because of the feedback that their loop that has been created with social media and the internet. People have a voice in what a brand does now.
Right. What about cost? Have they done studies on TV commercial versus hiring an influencer to do a YouTube video?
The research that I've seen in general, and I think the influencer marketing is still an emerging marketing channel. The research I've seen is that the return on investment tends to be much better from influencer advertising than traditional media, but you can't always use them in the same way. Television is still an effective ad. I think that we can talk about this later, but the media landscape is changing. There's a lot of television that we watch on Netflix and HBO and Amazon that doesn't have any commercials in it anymore. But it still can be a very good tool to create mass awareness. Like there's no other way to reach 110 million people all at once with a commercial than the Super Bowl. And to a lesser degree, some other television channels, you can generate widespread awareness really quickly. You may not be able to do that with an influencer campaign. But generally speaking, the ROI, I've seen the ROI, the research I've seen says the ROI is much more efficient for influencer campaigns.
How do you determine the mix? If you're doing an ad campaign now, the mix of social versus traditional?
Complicated. It depends on what your specific objectives are at the moment. You have it isn't as I don't think you can say it's as simple as you do put 30% in this and 40% in that. It depends on where the brand is in its development, what it's trying to accomplish, who it's trying to reach. If you're trying to reach a much younger audience, you might lean much more into social media because they tend to be a little more skeptical of traditional media. They don't like being sold. There was this great study, I think it was Deloitte did it in the last 2 years, suggesting that people are becoming ad allergic between all the changing media landscape where people are willing to pay for their content as opposed to have it be free and supported by making them watch ads, and technology like on your DVR or ad blockers you can use on your phone or your computer, that people are just trying to push advertising to the side to an extent. So it makes it very challenging if that's the way you've built your brand over the years. To build one today.
So if you're a company or an ad agency looking to hire an influencer, what do you look for?
Well, first and foremost, depending on how many people you're trying to reach, right? You can do everything from a giant, these celebrity influencers
with big followings.
Sure, with giant millions of followers and things like that, or you could use micro influencers. And then the next thing you're going to try to do is how well aligned is it with your brand? Are they already using your brand? Is it really authentic? Because I think if you're going to use an influencer, it really needs to be authentic. It can't be like a paid celebrity endorsement. So I think brands will look for ones that have already shown an affinity and interest for their product, or even if it's a micro influencer. And then they're going to say, do they fit with our values? And some influencers are more edgy than others. So that if you wanted to make yourself attractive to a certain brand, you would have to sort of be reflective of the values of that kind of brand. And do they appeal to the right audience, right? One thing is just to have a certain amount of reach, but are you reaching the audience that brand wants to
And when
reach?
you're talking about micro-influencers, from your perspective, what would be the level of following an influencer would have to have?
Again, it depends on the situation. I would say at least 5,000, but probably 5 or 10,000 before somebody's going to start to be interested as a brand and say, yes, I could get real value out of this. Below that, the effort might not be worth it.
Right. What do you see on the horizon for influencers?
I think it's going to become a growing marketing channel, and still people are trying to figure it out, how to make it work. But ultimately, it's word of mouth advertising. If it's somebody you admire, you see them using, and it's better to see them using it authentically as opposed to having them pitch it to you. If they're using it authentically, you're going to be predisposed to want to do that, just like you would, a friend. People think of influencers like they're
friends.
Like friends. So it's like getting a recommendation from a very well-regarded friend. So I think you're going to see a growing use of
that you've chosen to be their friend.
Absolutely.
We lightly touched on it at the very start. that your career in advertising, you've just launched a new venture.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's called Invigor is the name of the company.
Spell that.
INVIGOR. And, the idea is invigorating brand, helping invigorate brands. And I think it's come for... The reason I started is because my thinking about how brands are being built today is evolving. Because the media landscape is evolving, because consumers are evolving. And my belief is that the best brands today are built more from the inside than from the outside. Say, when we were talking about kind of pre-internet, if you had a giant media budget, a giant TV advertising budget, and a great ad agency that could come up with really clever ads, and you could run them so often that people, eventually decided to believe,
by osmosis,
or it could just play back what they were about, you could build a brand that way. And now, if you say something, you have to be able to back it up. You have to be able to walk the walk. Because there's so many tools people have to go online and basically call bullshit if you're not saying something that's true or authentic, and you see that happen a lot. They have so many ways to express themselves, and people research brands a lot more and purchases a lot more because it's so easy. So I think it's really important that the best brands today are the ones that stand for something, that have kind of a higher purpose, that stand for something that either makes the world a little more interesting or a little better. And by that, I don't mean in an altruistic way. I mean, there's certainly brands that do that, and they do that well. But
colored socks is an
yeah,
example.
exactly.
I mean, it makes the world better.
Exactly.
You feel better about your feet.
Exactly. You feel like your socks look a little more stylish. But big brands like Apple, there's a great. They've always been about empowering creative thinking through technology, and that at least was Steve Jobs' original vision. And he had this great quote that I always love to use. He said he thought of the original Mac as being a bicycle for the mind, as a way for you to get to new, more interesting places faster than you could without it. And I always thought that's making the world more interesting. They're also the most they have the highest market cap of any brand in the world. They're the most valuable brand in the world. So I would say that, marrying a higher purpose with an incredible a great product, of course, and an incredible customer experience. Most of the brands today realize that it's not just what you stand for, it's not just the product or service itself, it's the entire experience you have around that. And again, Apple's a great example of a brand that has done that so well, from their online experience to their retail experience to the Genius Bar. It is an experience. It's and then they've created an entire ecosystem with music and video as well, and phones. So that's I'm focused on helping brands figure out what is your higher purpose that's going to help you achieve your full potential, and making sure that you have a customer experience and content, which may include advertising, content to support that. And also, if you know who you are and you know who your customers are, you're also going to be better at continuously innovating. Because I think today, if you're not continuously innovating, you're falling behind. Like what is great today might only be good tomorrow. So you constantly have to sort of be disrupting yourself.
Well, my youngest son made the comment a month or two ago. He said, "Can you believe how fast technology is changing?"
Yeah, and this is your son.
This is my son saying this, and it's like, yeah, I can actually. Right. So how can people find you? Invigorconsulting.com,
or they can find me, Brian Dunbar, on LinkedIn.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, John.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.